Welcome to Kidmin Backstage, the place where we talk about kids ministry and take a peek behind the scenes. We try to share a little bit of what we've learned that works for us and some of our failures so you can avoid them. We release a new episode every Friday, and this is your backstage pass to see the magic or disaster that happens behind the scenes of our kids ministry. I'm your host, Gabe Baker, and today I am joined by Brother Miles Story. How's it going?
It's going good. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah. We were just talking about the desk, so this is your first time.
Yep, it's done. I get to hide behind the desk now.
Yeah. So I have a cough drop in my mouth because I've been very sick, and so hopefully that was why there was a little pause in the opening.
Yeah.
I was trying to move it to the other side of my mouth.
Yeah.
I should have chewed it up before we started, so maybe I'll do that in the mic. But all right, well, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about world class.
World class. So this is a term that I've heard used a lot. Is, you know, being world class, like a world class leader or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And then I've even heard of like talking about the world stage. You know, it's usually has to do with politics or something, but operating at a super high level, you know, at the world stage. So the difference between good and exceptional often lies in one's commitment to excellence. And so that's kind of the difference, that tipping point, so to speak. And so many of us, we settle for basic expectations, but we don't ever reach our full potential. And I think that it's not always a conscious decision. You know, it's just like we just are I've been guilty of it myself, going through the motions, and we think, you know, the status quo, we're meeting, you know, the expectations. So we find ourselves getting by with adequate performance, and then we lose sight of what true excellence looks like. So, but I feel like within each of us and those listening, that we have the capacity for world-class achievement, to stand out. Basically, another term, 5-star, to be a 5-star contributor within our kids' ministries. And so that's kind of what we want to recognize today, is how to overcome that mediocrity trap and chart a course towards, you know, being exceptional.
Yeah, because I know this term has, this phrase has been very popular listed. It feels like I've been reading it all over the place lately. But mediocrity is the killer of greatness.
Yes.
Just kind of just like you said, going through the motions. It's super easy because, I mean, we work full-time jobs. We got families. We got this pulling our attention and that pulling our attention. It's so easy to just slip into that trap of going through the motions.
Yeah, it's good enough. And it's easy to feel like, you know, because there's value in consistency.
100%.
And so I think that we do have to be careful. You know, we're not always going to be on the peak in the mountaintop. We understand that. But also we have to be careful that we're not using maintenance as an excuse for mediocrity. You know what I mean? Like, we can be like, well, we're just maintaining and we're just going through the motions, but we're being consistent, and that's and we're not growing. You know, we're not excelling to that world stage. So, I can't remember. I think we might have talked about something similar to this, maybe in the tipping point or something. But but in our first point is good enough. And so when we consistently meet minimum expectations, we kind of create this safety net, and it feels secure. It gives us a security because we're doing good enough. Yeah, but yet it puts a cap on our potential, you know, to reach new heights, because it's like it truly is like a safety net. It's like, okay, well, we're doing good enough. We're doing it. It's good. And I think also when there's a danger, like, what do they say about you know, if you're the smartest person in the room, you need to find a different room. Yes. So I think there's also a danger when you're doing, quote unquote, good enough, air quotes, when you're doing good enough and other people are pointing and saying, oh, you're doing really good. And it's a trap, because then now you're like, oh yeah, we got it going on. And when you maybe have so much potential that's lying dormant.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
it's kind of like the musician who just I've seen this is a perfect example. I've seen those musicians, they fall into that trap of just they know the song, they know how to play it, they know how to play it in these keys, they know how to do this, but they never challenge themselves, and then all of a sudden a challenge comes their way and they're like, oh no, what am I going to do? It's kind of like the ideas of we always got to be preparing, we always got to be growing, because like if you're right in the middle, like if say a hurricane or a giant storm comes up, and all of a sudden you're going to try to prepare right then and there, you're going to be struggling and it's not going to work out. You're going to be only being able to find a couple hot dog buns, but the person that's been
they're soggy.
Yeah, they're soggy. But the person that's been thinking about this, or thinking a couple steps ahead, they're ultimately way more successful.
They're going to fare a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, I think what's the saying? We've used it before, but when opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we should be constantly preparing. And here's the other thing, I guess, is hopefully this doesn't stomp all over my notes later, but I'll just mention it now before I forget. Part of what actually even brought this whole subject on as a podcast topic is I was thinking about this idea that I think especially in the church world, with ministry, and because it's so much of it is volunteer.
Yes.
There are paid positions here and there, but so much of it is volunteer, and that might lead to this. But I think that in the church world, we have volunteers that come on and they take on a ministry, and maybe step into like kids ministry or Sunday school, and they're leading that, and it kind of almost starts with the premise of good enough.
Yes.
Like, okay, you're good enough to volunteer, so let's have you do it. Like in the church world, there's a lot less tryouts for positions. I mean, we have it occasionally, maybe here and there, but it's a lot of times it's like, okay, you can sing a little bit. Okay, well, you're in the choir then.
Yeah.
And so there's a low bar often, low barrier for entry. Mm-hmm. And so I think because of that culture, that often this idea of world class is not only escapes us as a responsibility, like, okay, we need to do better, but it also is like it's so much easier to point outside and say, they're awesome, they have it going on, they're so cool, they're world class. I wish we could be like them. Well, I wish we could be like that. And we never think of ourselves, I'm not articulating this very well, but we never think of ourselves as, could we be world class? Having
that potential to reach that place. I mean, like you're talking about music, there's so many of people in our apostolic range, they put out amazing music, but they didn't start there.
Right.
It took time, it took energy, and it took them saying, okay, I'm going to keep on challenging myself. I'm going to keep on pushing myself. I'm not going to stay in this little box. Okay, how can I get outside this box? How can I've reached a plateau right now.
Yes.
How can I push beyond this plateau where I'm at right now? And then they start looking, what can I do? Who can I talk to?
Yeah, where can I go from here? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then and usually what happens is we notice them, we notice other people, well, with the world stage, we notice people when they've reached some kind of pinnacle or height. Well, we don't see, like you said, we don't see all the struggles that was in the dark,
It's funny that you mentioned that, coming to church here, even I can say like this, before I even really got involved in music, I'm like, man, we have some amazing music. And then after a while, I realized why we have amazing music, because it's a lot of practice.
A lot of practice.
That's a lot of practice, and that's how we have gotten to the place that we're at, is because we've put in the practice and the work,
the time, the effort. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we're blessed with a pastor that puts focus on that. He created a culture where it's like you got to work at it. All right, so that leads us to number 2. Set higher standards. And so when you set higher standards, there's a couple ways that a couple notes I put in here is actively study those whose successes, they've had success outside of your own ministry, whether it's in your church or whether it's another church or whatever. And you do have to be careful. We did a podcast a long time ago. The grass is always greener on the other side.
Yeah.
So you gotta. There's a balance, in all of this. But if you study those people that you look up to, and it could even be within your own church, it could even be within your own ministry, where you see somebody that, let's say they're really good with praying kids through. They have a talent or a gift. Is studying that and saying, okay, what. And talking to them, what do you do? What is it? How is it that you have this skill? And reaching, beyond ourselves and saying, okay, well, let's set a higher standard for ourselves. And that, if in our previous point, I forgot to mention the self-audit your performance. When you set a higher standard for yourself or for your own ministry, when you set that higher standard, along with that, hand in hand with that, is self-auditing. Like looking at yourself, looking at your ministry, and saying, "Okay, are we everything that we should be?" There's somebody that I know that I don't know if they would ever admit it, but they look up to me.
Okay.
And so I have people that admit it, that they look up to me too. But there's this person that I think that they look up to me. And the reason I think that, and I think would be too proudful to say that they do, but they expect so much out of me. Because like they'll come to visit or something, and they'll be like surprised that I'm not doing something that I wish I was,
Yeah.
But they're surprised that I'm not, like, let's just a hypothetical example, because I'm trying to be really vague here. Like, they're surprised I'm not writing songs or something. And I, kind of like, well, man, I should be doing that. And so I use that as an example to, in essence, in kind of one way, we should, excuse me, sorry, sick voice. In essence, we should have the highest standard for ourselves.
Yes.
And so, instead of trying to live up to other people's standards, really, we should have a high standard for ourselves.
Can I say it like this, and hopefully it comes out right? We need to be our own worst critic.
Yes, that's perfect.
And we need to be hard on ourselves, but like there's also a balance in that too. We don't need to beat ourselves up so much that we don't want to, that we feel like, what's the point? But there's a very fine line balance, and I'm speaking from a little bit of experience on this topic. But we do got to be our own self-critic to challenge ourselves.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Because ultimately, in the end, we're going to be us and our ministry is going to be what's going to benefit from that challenging, from that self-studying of ourselves. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and if when we're looking to set those standards, there's a couple things. One is I think of kids. If we, we've talked about bad behavior, for example. If you accept bad behavior, or if you lower the bar, we did one called Raise the Bar. You lower the bar, and then expectations go down. So when we set the standard or we raise the bar, we bring everybody up to a certain level of expectation. And so if we can be on top of it ourselves, if we can have a super high standard, then when we turn around and we're interacting with the kids in our ministry, we can be pulling them up to that standard. We can be drawing them, to a higher standard and a level of excellence, so that when you come in, it's kind of like this. You have the ministry side or the leadership side, which is kind of what we're talking about today, and then you have the church side, the congregation side, or the kids in Sunday school. I remember years ago, this is a long time ago, I went to visit a church. I think it was in California with my parents, and it was a very large church. It was much bigger than our church. I don't know how big it was, but it was really big, and their music was awesome. And I remember the way that they sang. They sang, and the congregation was singing, as you would expect. But it was like they were singing the parts, like the alto, tenor, and
wow.
So I mean, it was just amazing and incredible. But just the other night here at our church, we sang a song that the choir used to sing, and oh man, now I can't remember what it is.
I think I remember I know what you're talking about.
Do you know the title of it?
I don't remember, but I do remember the situation that you're talking about.
Because I did parts with our singers.
Because it was parts were done, and so like you could almost hear it. Like I didn't even recognize it until you just mentioned. But I know, I wish I could remember what song, but I do remember what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it used to be a choir song, and they would go through, and there's like this. It's a bridge or whatever, and sopranos do a part, altos do a part, tenors do a part, and then they cut the music, and everybody comes in. Well, we have 9 praise singers, I think, and so it's like three of them, or whatever doing it. So it wasn't a choir, but it was. And I had a flashback when we did that. I had a flashback of when I was a kid and visited that church. And I thought, this is what I saw, basically, is this kind of thing. And, we're doing it. We've come to that standard,
Yeah.
So, saying all of that, like the ministry side and the church side, is when we, as leaders, raise the standard for ourselves, for our ministry, and we are operating at a high level and high performance, then the kids and the church naturally follow. And so when somebody comes in to visit, what my vision is a kid visits Sunday school, and not only are all the adults and staff on point and perfectly executing their job and creating a relationship, but even the kids that come all of the time, they are raised to a certain standard that's world class. So the kids are like, I felt so welcome there. It felt so good to go there because not just the adults were nice to me, but the kids were nice to me. And the kids were praying, and the kids were worshiping, So that's, man, that's world class, right?
That is definitely world class.
And then the other note I had on there too is don't just look at the biggest ministries, but look at values and impact. And so it can be tempting to say, and I'm not saying don't look at those, but it can be tempting to look at a large children's ministry, a large Sunday school or something, and like, man, they got it going on. Let's emulate them. And maybe there are some things you can take takeaways, but I would also say that there's maybe ministries that aren't just aren't super large or whatever, but they have it going on in their quality.
Yeah, exactly. You got to, especially with smaller churches, you got to be able to take, like, you can't put, like, even for example, like us, can't necessarily staff the amount of people that you need to put on exactly what we do. You got to also be able to do what fits your situation and fits your need. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. In fact, rarely there's not a lot of churches that do the staffing like we do.
Yeah,
and we're not a huge church, but it's the way our Sunday school operates, and we're blessed to have that. So, okay. Number 3 is develop a growth ecosystem. Doesn't that sound cool?
Yeah, it makes me feel like I'm in science class again.
Yeah, so so the idea is that excellence is contagious, and so if you deliberately surround yourself with high performers who challenge your thinking and they elevate your standards. So it's kind of, again, a lot of these overlap, but again, not being the smartest person in the room and looking for those people that are high energy, high achievers. I don't want to be the big fish in a small pond.
Yes.
I want to.
So good.
I want to be pushed to go to the next level, and so it's not as much fun sometimes, but to walk in somewhere and be like intimidated or uncomfortable, and so if we can surround ourselves, with that. And so I guess with the growth ecosystem that I kind of my thought in that is have a system to regularly be pushing yourself to that higher standard. So, for example, we started this off about mediocrity and slipping into that trap. If we can develop a system or a method of self-management, a method of management for our ministry and our leadership, where we can never slip into that too long, because we have like this like period where, okay, it's time to audit.
Yes.
Where are we at? Are we reaching our mission? Are we reaching our goals? And then, trying to develop, and I don't know, I didn't really articulate a bunch of ideas for this, but trying to develop maybe like paths or certain systems where we are pushed and we are challenged. Okay, here's an example maybe, is one thing that I have done in the past. We haven't done this in a while, maybe a couple of years, but I have done this with our event, Heart of Christmas, and then even with our August conference, I've set the stage, like, we're going to do the same thing we've done. We're going to do this big epic Sunday school event, but this year we're going to focus on costumes.
Yes.
And so we're going to do all the acting, we're going to have the soundtracks, we're going to do all that, but this year we're going to put a big emphasis on costumes. And then I've done it with Art of Christmas too. And then, like, okay, now this year we're going to put a big emphasis on our songs, whatever. And so in a way, it's kind of a way to create, it's like a system to create, like, where it's not this big, huge elephant, eat elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of creating a path, like, okay, let's tackle this one thing.
Yeah.
All of this needs to be better. Well, let's tackle this one thing and let's make this better. So if you think about our Sunday school right now, when I was writing these notes, I was thinking about this. So, like, if you go backstage, it's a little bit messy right now because we're getting towards the end of a theme. We're wrapping up, and we got just stuff back there. We have some screens that we got that we didn't use for this theme, and so we're going to be using them for the next one, but they've been stored back there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's a mess, and then, like, I think most of our costumes are in pretty good shape, but we've had it where there's been costumes that were torn and stuff, and they're just hanging there, in the closet.
Yeah.
And then, like, what's something else? I think I got it fixed, but we were having trouble with the backstage screen where it wasn't connecting, so you had to look at the iPad instead of the big screen, for the timer and stuff. So there's all these little things that you could look at. And so I thought, what if we were to take those items and just, like, if you focus on just that one and you say, okay, we want this backstage area to be spotless clean. Well, that's an easy one. Tackle that, and get it all organized. Let's build a shelf here. Let's, put some drawers in or whatever, and let's reorganize this and just clean it.
Yeah.
Spick and span. Or the costumes, like, okay, we got these costumes and we've used this over and over. Let's buy something new, or let's fix this, repair this, So you could take each of these elements and make them world class.
Yes. I can't remember where I've heard this. I don't know if we talked about this at one time, but when you're talking about this, it reminds me of the idea of the 1% improvement.
Yes.
You're just trying to, okay, where can I... Because you got to think, when you think of 1%, 1% is not very much.
Not very much.
But when you do 1% here, 1% there, 1% everywhere, it all adds up in the end.
Yes.
And ultimately, it's going to make things so much better and greater and bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, there was, I think it was a podcast. I also taught on this at a children's ministry seminar too. But, I can't remember all the details, but it had to do with bicycle racing. And so... what is it? There's a theory. It's called marginal gains. Marginal gains philosophy. That's what it is. And so it was the guy, I can't remember his name, but he was basically, it was 1%. Like, they improved the tires of the bicycles. when they traveled, they took these pillows with them so that they could get a better night's sleep. And it was just like all these little tiny incremental, incremental progress. And then, but all that adds up. You do that 100 times, that's 100%. So, marginal gains philosophy. That's good. That fits really well with this. And so if you actively seek out training resources and development opportunities, so this is something I think I do fairly well at because I love to read, and so I'm constantly reading. But if we can have that just as a part of our ecosystem, as part of, this is just who we are. We're always seeking out training. We're always seeking out books or articles or whatever. We're just podcasts, like Kidman Backstage. We're just looking for ways to grow, and it's just part of our ecosystem.
Yeah, and something that make myself a little transparent here. Something I had to do when, especially on the beginning of my growth and just overall as a person in ministry and something like that, is I had to learn how to eat the meat and spit out the bones.
Yes,
and it's something that I feel like I've finally overcome it. But just take everything you can glean and it's like they even talk about this in different leadership classes and everything. Glean all their amazing benefits and just leave their bad habits alone. Yeah. Move on. Take all the good, leave the bad. Take all the good, leave the bad.
Yeah, and so when you say that, you're referring to sometimes there's things that are not our doctrine.
Yes, not our doctrine, or especially things that will go against biblical teachings. But there's other things that are absolutely amazing concepts that we could use and that can benefit us.
Yeah, I agree. I take a lot of things from even the business world, where it's all about, the bottom line and money and that kind of thing. And so, but there's a lot of values there in this subject, even in becoming world class. There's a lot of values there that we can implement and apply to the church and to our kids ministry. Absolutely. All right, number 4, embrace discomfort. So growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone, is what I wrote. And going back to walking into a room and being intimidated or feeling uncomfortable. I have now, at the time it didn't feel fortunate, or maybe I should say it's ongoing. So maybe it doesn't feel it doesn't feel fortunate, but I have been fortunate in that I've been the spearhead of a lot of different things around here with the church, and so pastor will be like, "Hey, why don't you do this?" And oh man, and it's so uncomfortable. But what that has done is it has pushed me to realize that being uncomfortable is usually a good thing.
Yes,
when you're pushed out, on stage or whatever it may be. And then you develop from there, and so that it makes you stretch. It makes you go beyond your abilities, and then you grow, and you grow into it.
I can 100% concur with what you're saying. When you sent me the outline, I could just had to chuckle at myself because I can remember so many times in my life that those challenges, I did not enjoy the challenges at the time, but it made me grow so much. And looking back, I'm so thankful for those challenges. Yeah, because it ultimately makes me better. It's just like we could talk about the fitness world and lifting weights. Yep. It's those constant, little growths. It's uncomfortable. Your muscles are sore, but it's growth overall, and ultimately it's going to make you so much better. Yeah, and the working out and that athletic side of it is a really good analogy. It's a really easy one to use because basically if you are doing something that you're comfortable with, you're not growing. You might maybe be maintaining, maintain,
but it's the mediocrity. You're not growing. And so when you are working out and that moment of muscle failure or whatever, you're pushing your limits, that's where the growth is really starting to happen. And that's where you're maximizing the growth. No pain, no gain is the saying they have in the gym. And so if we can regularly seek out those challenges that stretch us and stretch our capabilities. I've used this example so many times. I'm going to teach on it, I think, but the rubber band.
Mm-hmm.
The rubber band is not useful until it's stretched.
Exactly.
That's what it's for. And so if you have a rubber band sitting on the table and it's just sitting there, it's not really useful. It's just sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
But when you stretch it tight around a ponytail, around a roll of paper, whatever it may be, that's when it's most useful. And the more it's stretched, before it breaks, is where you're getting the maximum use out of that rubber band. So if we can stretch ourselves, to be successful, if we can stretch ourselves beyond what we're used to, it's comfortable for that rubber band to sit on the table.
Yeah.
And so it's comfortable for us, and I'm guilty of it. It's comfortable for us to go through the routines and the motions, and in Sunday school, it's tempting to live from Sunday to Sunday.
It is.
And okay, we got through that Sunday, and okay, great job. Let's work on the next Sunday. And even if we're working on 1 week out, we can feel like we're really on top of it, and I'm guilty of this too. But what can we do if we step back and look at a bigger picture and say, how can we be excellent? How can we be where we're ready to be reviewed or audited by pastor, or by some Sunday school guru or something? What can we do to make everything just top notch, where kids walk in and they're amazed, kids walk in and the presence of God is there, and ultimately kids are getting the Holy Ghost and they're developing in discipleship. What do we do to be on the world stage? How do we be world class at that, rather than just surviving from Sunday to Sunday?
Yeah, kind of like we've mentioned that mediocrity. Hopefully I can say this and it doesn't sound too wrong, but I was thinking about this, but mediocrity is the killer of revival.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Because when you just okay, I'm just going to go through the motions, just coast. We can just coast down easy street.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Mediocrity is a killer of revival. Absolutely. Because you get comfortable, and and then you don't feel the need to change. You don't feel the need, because it's we're getting by, But I remember a long time ago, I taught a lesson about, I used a bunch of D's for alliteration, but I talked about deterioration, and I said that things naturally, left alone, they naturally deteriorate.
Yeah.
So you think of an RV is a really good one, but even if you think of a home, a lot of times the people are going to be gone for an extended period of time. They have somebody live in their home. They house sit, because just it being used and stuff, it doesn't become stale and dank and damp and whatever, and so it's getting use. And so when things are left alone, they naturally decline, they naturally deteriorate. And if we don't expand and grow, then we're naturally going to decline. And so if we don't focus on growth and stretching and maximizing our capabilities and becoming world class, then we will eventually become nothing.
Exactly.
So with that, let's do a recap on that happy note.
Yeah.
So number 1 is quote unquote good enough.
Yeah.
So don't settle for good enough.
Always push.
Push, yes. And number 2, set higher standards. And of course, we had a whole podcast on raise the bar. And so set your standards high, and you're always going to be better off. Reaching, it's I think they tell you, I don't know this for sure, my son would know, but I think they tell you when you're trying to learn how to dunk or whatever, to jump and aim for a little bit beyond the hoop, beyond the rim. You're aiming higher than what you expect to get. And so, aim beyond, reach for the stars, as they say, And so, Number 3, develop a growth ecosystem, something where you are constantly challenging your ministry, constantly challenging your team, and where it's just part of a system. It's just something that happens periodically. You are always, so you can't slip into that mediocrity, you know. And then embrace discomfort.
Yeah.
The best growth happens at the edge of our comfort zone instead of sitting in there, you know, being comfortable.
Learn how to enjoy the sand in the shoes.
Yes. Learn how to enjoy the sand with the shoes. That's good. All right, and then just a quick list of resources. So if you're listening to this and you want to see it, it's on YouTube. You can search Kidman Backstage, or the name of the channel is @Gabe-Baker. And then there's some podcasts, some great podcasts to listen to. Truism with Brother James Pelletier. The Sunday School Minute, it's kind of a shorter podcast, it's like 10 minutes or less, with Brother Eric Stender. And we have the Apostolic Children's Network, that's with Brother Chris Bradshaw. And then Apostolic Children's Ministry 2.0 with Brother Philip Booker. So there's some great resources, all in the realm of kid ministry and kids leaders and things. So. All right, with that, I think it's a wrap.
All right, sounds good.